The Browns don't need to keep Kenny Pickett, and I'll tell you why. Coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Dog Pound? I'm Spencer German, your host of the Locked On Browns podcast, and proudly covering your Cleveland Browns each and every single day in the land and on the road. I've seen enough to believe that the Browns don't need to keep Kenny Pickett, but they're going to anyway. We'll talk about it. What I'm taking away from Dillon, Gabriel, and Shedeur Sanders and their first preseasons, plus the first team offense, give you something to be excited about, some enticing things that we saw from that group today. I do want to first thank you, though, for being in every day here at the Locked On Browns podcast, making this your first listen every single day. Remember, you can find Cleveland Browns content with Locked On Browns every week, Monday through Friday, guaranteed, with bonus content on some weekends as well, like this very episode right here, and it's all free to you. Whatever, just make sure you hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you get your podcast. And, of course, at the Locked On Browns YouTube channel, where you can also get involved in the show by sharing your thoughts on anything we discussed today in the comment section. This is your team, so be part of that conversation every single day. And I do think the Browns can get away with not keeping four quarterbacks. I think they can, frankly, get away with moving on from Kenny Pickett and him being the one that they did not bring back onto the 53-man roster when cutdown day here comes on Tuesday. And the reason I feel that way, despite what we saw from Shedeur Sanders today, and I know we will get into that, certainly. I know that's what everybody wants to talk about, how these rookie quarterbacks looked, what they did, some of the struggles from Shedeur Sanders, which, again, I will talk about, I promise. But the reason I feel this way really doesn't have a ton to do with whether or not one quarterback was good, one quarterback was bad. I think it just more so has to do with, more than anything, trying to prioritize the development of these rookie quarterbacks. But I do think Dillon Gabriel today gave you something, provided you with something, that he provided you with proof, rather, that he can operate this offense with poise, that he can be a reliable option if there were to be an injury to Joe Flacco, to come in and run this offense the way that it's supposed to be run. I think we saw him sort of pick up from where he was in a week ago in Philly, and continue to just sort of build upon that and do even more with the opportunity he was given to sort of command this offense against it was pretty much the Rams like 3s and 4s all day. They only really brought about half their team, if that, with them to Cleveland in general. So it wasn't like you were seeing the best of the best out there. I get that. But I just think that you saw enough promise from Dillon Gabriel in the last two games. And I do think, frankly, we've seen enough from Shedeur Sanders in practice and in his preseason outings, even though today didn't go the way that people would have hoped. And I believe that the talent is there with Shedeur Sanders, that he's continuing to improve. Yes, that's totally fine. Adjusting to the NFL takes time. And I think he can be your quarterback 3 if that's how the Browns want to have this thing set. And you can be on your way with Flacco, Gabriel, and Shedeur Sanders, and not try to throw another body in there and another sort of roadblock to getting to those rookies at some point this season in the form of Kenny Pickett. I get that Joe Flacco was starting. I get why that was the decision that was made, and we are going to talk about Joe Flacco and the performance from the first team offense today, which I thought is going to get buried by the rookie quarterbacks, but I actually thought they showed just exactly what you're looking for in terms of what you want to see from this group going into the regular season, especially after last year, when that offense was historically bad. So we'll get to all that as well. But so I get starting Joe Flacco. I totally understand it. We sort of felt it was going to go that direction for several weeks now. And I said from the spring that I thought Joe Flacco would be the starter. I get that. But the timeline of getting these rookies out on the field and getting these rookies a more in-depth evaluation of them is going to be minuscule if you somehow have Kenny Pickett shoehorned into this group just because, well, the team really likes him. I just don't need to see or waste reps on Kenny Pickett as the backup quarterback for this team at any point this season and prolong the process of getting to these two rookies that, like I said, I think through this preseason showed you a lot of what you wanted to see. I think in general, I get it. It was a bad day for Shedeur, but I think Browns fans should leave this game today against the Rams, a walk-off win, by the way, with Andre Smith hitting the the game-winning field goal as time expired. Feeling happy, I guess, about that if you're 3-0 in the preseason is your kind of thing, but also just frankly feeling happy and feeling pretty good about the quarterback situation as a whole in terms of like where things are at. I think Dillon showed you he is ahead of that curve a little bit. You saw, I think, why the Browns like him and why they drafted him in the third round. He sort of, I think, in a lot of ways proved them right in that regard. And so if you weren't sure about Dillon Gabriel, I think he answered some of those questions this preseason. If you have your doubts about Shedeur Sanders, I get that. But I also think like with Shedeur, the talent is there. And that certainly showed out in that first preseason game. Today it didn't go as well, but I still think that talent is there. And the big thing with him is just continuing to get better. And Andrew Berry on the broadcast today, I know, talked about it. Like with Shedeur Sanders, he's going from learning a college playbook, and he sort of related it to learning English and then having to learn Mandarin and then going to the NFL and trying to learn an NFL playbook. They are trying to give him time to be patient. And if that's your goal, if that's the thought process here, then why do I need Kenny Pickett in this equation? I just don't. I get that they're trying to win now while also thinking about the future and developing young guys along the way. But Joe Flacco is your win now guy. I like keeping 4 doesn't add up to me to when you have 2 rookies in this room as the smart thing to do to get the best evaluation of these 2 players. And I'm saying this while understanding that they're going to keep 4 quarterbacks. All 4 of these guys that were part of this quote unquote competition are going to be here come Tuesday. I'm convinced of that. I think most people are convinced of that. Andrew Berry, as he talked about, the development of Shedeur Sanders, also talked about how the idea of keeping 4 quarterbacks is something that they view as an opportunity, not as something that's as outlandish as it might seem in the NFL when most teams only keep 3 and some teams even only keep 2 at times. There is something to be said, I guess, for, you have this, the last couple of years, you've had a quarterback situation that's just been a rotating cast of characters because guys have just gotten hurt over and over again, and you've had to just go to the next guy and go to the next guy and go to the next guy. And so maybe keeping 4 kind of provides you with some extra security and comfort at that position. I can wrap my head around that to a degree, but is that a reason to keep 4? No. Like I want to see these rookies develop, and I don't know that I need a 6-game sample size at the end of the season, maybe split between the 2 to get that. I'd rather see them earlier in the season if things go awry with Joe Flacco and you're like, well, this ain't working. I'd rather go to one of the rookies and see what they can do. And I think, like I said, that Shedeur has the talent to be good, to be great in this league. I've talked about that from the beginning. Understanding today wasn't his best performance, fine. I still believe that about Shedeur Sanders, and he's going to continue to learn. I think Dillon Gabriel similarly is going to continue to learn. And I think he at least showed you in these 2 preseason performances that he knows how to operate this Kevin Stefanski offense, and he can do what the team wants him to do. And I feel like Browns fans should leave like somewhat excited about the idea that like, okay, yeah, for Joe Flacco's back, and they're excited about that because they love Joe Flacco here in this town for 2023. And you have 2 rookies that have some promise and some things for people to watch play out and to be, excited to see down the line here. So I don't need to see Kenny Pickett. If it was up to me, I think I would have him as the odd man out. But my guess is they're going to keep 4. That seems to be the consensus. As I said, Andrew Berry practically teased it and said it on the broadcast with Chris Rose today, from what I understand. And it's probably going to happen that way unless, I guess, somebody calls up and wows them with a trade for Pickett. Or I guess if somebody wowed them with an offer for Shedeur Sanders, because if this team could improve a guy that they took in the 5th round and get like a 3rd round pick for him, I think the way that they operate and the analytics of it would absolutely come into play, and they would absolutely take a deal like that. But I just don't think that's going to happen. Shedeur was asked if he thinks he's on this team. He said yes after the game. I think 4 quarterbacks are here come Tuesday, but from my evaluation and my feelings on the room, I feel good enough about what I've seen from both Dillon Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders. And I'm saying this, yes, even after a day where Shedeur Sanders struggled a little bit, that I'd be comfortable moving with those 2 as your quarterbacks 2 and 3, and Joe Flacco sort of leading the charge, and do what you will with Kenny Pickett. But it's not going to happen that way, and I can almost promise you that. With all that said, let's talk a little bit more about Dillon. Let's talk a little bit more about Shedeur. What my thoughts are as we leave the preseason behind on those two, how far they've come, what we learned about them. We'll get into all those things coming up here on the Locked On Browns podcast. This episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. It's the best time of year. NFL kickoff is almost here. And that means fantasy football season is back in full swing. And this year, Yahoo Fantasy is turning things up with a fantasy football experience like never before. My most competitive fantasy league is Yahoo Fantasy. It's the most fun I have playing fantasy, super competitive. Got a lot of smack talk in this league. And as much fun as I'm having playing Yahoo Fantasy, you can too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your millionth league. To celebrate 28 years of fantasy greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days throughout the month of August. To kick it off, they just dropped their Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine Leagues, a killer new way to play fantasy football on Yahoo, where the lowest scoring team each week gets eliminated until there's one just left standing. With the season around the corner, now's the time to get your league together and give this new mode a try. Or if you're more into the classics, you can still play a head-to-head private league or join a public league. Stay tuned for more killer announcements and start playing Yahoo Fantasy right now at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. All right, so we touched on it in the first segment in terms of me talking about not needing to see this team necessarily keep for quarterbacks. But I want to dive a little bit deeper here on Dillon, Gabriel, and Shedeur Sanders and what we saw from them, I think, this entire preseason and training camp experience, because there is a lot to unpack here. And I know that what everyone's going to look at is the box score from today and the performances from today and say, well, this guy can do it and this guy can, and Shedeur shouldn't be here or whatever. There's going to be a lot of discourse on this. I am hoping that this platform, I mean, I'm saying this as I know my comments can get pretty volatile on this channel, but I hope that this platform is a space where we allow for nuance, where we allow for context, where we allow for all of those things. And I think that both these quarterbacks showed you a lot of good things this preseason. I think both these quarterbacks showed you that they have some things to work on in this preseason. And what I thought was interesting, I think we saw today why the Browns liked Dillon Gabriel so much. He's not perfect. We know he's undersized. That's probably going to play a role in how he's able to produce when he's out there with the first team, or if he's out there with the first team in meaningful games against another team's first team defense. There's things that he still has to work on, and height isn't one of the things that he can necessarily fix. But like most rookies, there's things that he needs to get better at. The operation, though, I think with him, and we've seen it the last 2 weeks, is smooth. He can absolutely run Kevin Stefanski's offense, and I am at least intrigued by what we saw this preseason to see more from him and see him continue to develop the same way I feel about Shedeur and seeing him continue to develop. And along the lines of Shedeur, I still think that he is the most talented of the two. Today was rough. There's no beating around the bush with that. Today was a rough day for him. He wasn't feeling the pocket well. I think that has been one of the biggest I think that has been one of the biggest points of reference in terms of his game and things that he needs to get better at. Even coming out of college at Colorado, it was the drift in the pocket stuff. I think we saw a lot of that today. There was moments where it looked like he had a pocket he could step up into and he just didn't, and he just kept dropping back further. He didn't feel the pocket as well today. And he tried to do a little bit too much at times. I think he held the ball a little too long at times, and he just didn't see guys that were sort of coming open. It was night and day from a couple weeks ago when it felt like he was seeing things really well and stepping up into that pocket. And I think those are just the growing pains and the learning curve that comes with the NFL. That's the number one thing that I want people to understand here when I talk about nuance and context and all those different things. He still has the talent, in my opinion. I would still bet on the talent that he can be successful in this league. The number one thing that he has to keep getting better at is his pocket presence. I think that's fair. And if he does that, he's going to be just fine. It is okay to say that Shedeur has room to grow, and that adjusting to the NFL takes time for some people. And yeah, you can throw out examples like, well, it didn't take Jaden Daniels a lot of time. It didn't take this first round pick a lot of time. And that's fair. But I throw there's plenty of quarterbacks in this league that didn't start year one or took a year to sort of learn, and then they started. And now Jordan Love's a perfect example of that, right? Sitting behind Aaron Rodgers. Now he's the starting quarterback for the Packers. I also think even on this roster, somebody like Jamari Thrash comes to mind. Guy who last year had some issues with catching the football. He worked at it, got better this offseason. Now he's the number 3 wide receiver on this team going into Tuesday's cutdown day. And it's that patience part of it. It's giving these guys time to sort of develop and not just thinking they have to have it all figured out at once. It's okay to say that about both these rookies, that they both have things to get better at. They're both going to continue to get better and develop while they're sort of learning behind somebody like Joe Flacco. And clearly, I think Kenny Pickett's going to be part of this picture as well, and that they don't have all the answers right now. But like that can be true. And we can also take away some things from this preseason and feel good about where they're at with both these guys, despite the performance today. And there is other context that comes into play here. Yes, Dillon Gabriel was going up against the number two, but not even the number twos. It was pretty much the Rams' third team. Shedeur Sanders was going up against a lot of the same guys because the Rams brought like half their roster here. Joe Flacco was going up against a lot of the same guys. Like that's fair. We can look back and say, certain people got certain reps with their certain teams throughout training camp and there wasn't a necessarily fair timeshare in terms of how those reps were distributed during practice. I've harped on that a ton. I've called out Kevin Stefanski for saying that this was an open competition from the beginning, because it clearly wasn't an open competition from the beginning with these guys. And we can even go back to like first preseason game for Shedeur, second preseason game for Dillon Gabriel, and the teams that they played, the rosters that they played, the units that they played in those games, and say, what was against this, it was against that. I think ultimately, like, the preseason is supposed to show us like if guys can play at this league or not. And I think both these players showed throughout the preseason that they can. If they were both just god awful in both situations that they were out here playing on the field, I think there would be more reason for concern about, like, yeah, these quarterbacks just don't have it. The fact that they both showed you in different moments and different times, and I think Shedeur made the most of his reps throughout training camp at practice, and especially in that first game of the preseason, and he tried to do some things today. I think Dillon Gabriel made the most of his reps on the field. And I think both guys sort of accomplished that in different ways. But like, I feel good. The reason I feel good about those two guys moving forward and trusting them to sort of handle the quarterbacking duties behind Joe Flacco without Kenny Pickett is that I think they showed you they can play in this league. And now it's just about like continuing to get them up to speed, continuing to get them to learn, continuing to teach them and help them fix the things that they need to work on. And if they can do that, I think they both can be successful in this league in some respects. And frankly, I do think that the Browns owe it to them to give them some time here to play this season once things go awry. And obviously, if Joe Flacco is great, we'll talk about him in a second, and the offense is great, and this team's in the playoff picture, nobody's going to be asking for the rookies because they're just going to be soaking up the fact that a team that had no expectations is now in the playoff picture, and we can talk about the rookies down the line. But if we're anticipating the season's going to go the way that it's going to go, it makes more sense to me to go from Flacco to these two guys, and that's my main point with all this. Both Shedeur Sanders and Dillon Gabriel show me enough this preseason to want to prioritize their development and them getting reps over Kenny Pickett. I want the Browns to throw more at them rather than waste time dealing with the Pickett thing sort of as the middleman before you get to these guys. And so I walk away with the nuance of this preseason being, yes, room for growth for both these quarterbacks. Dillon showed you some really nice things, I think, the last two games about how he operates this offense. I think Shedeur showed you the talent is there, and he's just got to hone in certain aspects of the way he plays, specifically as it pertains to him in the pocket and navigating those things. And if they continue working at that, if they continue getting better at that, I don't see why either of them shouldn't be on this roster. I don't see why either of them can't get better. And I think that's what we learned about both of them this preseason, is that adjusting to this league takes time. And it wasn't going to be all figured out one preseason, and the Browns are willing to give them that time. And I can guarantee you they'll both be on this roster come Tuesday. The same way I can guarantee all four guys are going to be on this roster come Tuesday. But anyway, final thoughts here in terms of the performance today. And I'll start with Joe Flacco and the first team offense and what we saw from that unit to start the game off. We'll talk about it here coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. This episode is brought to you by Betterhelp. These days, it feels like there's advice for everything. Cold plunges, gratitude journals, screen detoxes. But how do you know what actually works for you? With so much information online about mental health and wellness, it can be overwhelming to figure out what's true and what will actually help. That's where talking to a licensed therapist through BetterHelp can make all the difference. You get real personalized guidance instead of just guessing based on something you saw on social media or online. With over 30,000 therapists, BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy platform, serving over 5 million people, and it's easy to fit them into your schedule. Just click and connect. You can switch therapists at any time if you need to as well. Talk it out with BetterHelp. Our listeners can get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. All right, so we spent a lot of time talking about the rookie quarterbacks. We spent a lot of time talking about what this quarterback room is going to look like come Tuesday. I think we owe it to Joe Flacco and the first team offense to talk about them as well. We'll hit on the defense a little bit too and what we saw from them. And one guy that we know is already going to make this roster as kind of a fun, feel-good story for the 53 from training camp. We'll get to that here as well. But in terms of Flacco and what he showed us today, 9 of 10, 71 yards, the 1 touchdown to Harold Fannin Jr. on the second drive. I think you saw exactly what you wanted to see from the Browns first team offense, especially if you're somebody going into the season that's like, listen, I get it. The rookie quarterbacks are the talk of the town. Everyone wants to see them play. We're all excited about the potential of those guys. But I'm focused on the football season. I know there's some fans out there that feel that way, that just want to see some football. They just want to see this team go out and play, and they want to give them a fighting chance to see what they can do this season. And if that's you, I think you leave pretty excited. Maybe excited is the wrong word, because there is still a lot of things that this team has to figure out. And we know this team has some weaknesses and deficiencies in certain areas. But I think you leave feeling pretty good, and at least maybe the right word is intrigued by what we saw from that first unit on offense today in terms of just what they went out and did. First series a little bit rough, couldn't quite convert the third down on the throw to David Njoku, and you had a drop in there by Jerry Jeudy that sort of derailed it. And if he catches that, maybe they do pick up the first down. So, but then they come out in that second drive was like everything that you want from the first team offense and from this Browns offense just in general. If you wanted flashbacks to 2023, it looked like that. Flacco was decisive. Operation was good. No pre-snap penalties. They were moving up and down the field. They marched down 7 plays, 44 yards, and punched it in, obviously, on the throw to Harold Fannin Jr., the 15-yard touchdown throw, which was a really nice ball just in general. You walked away, I think, feeling pretty good about that drive as a whole. And what they were able to do. The fact that some of the young guys got involved on that drive as well. Dillon Sampson had a nice play where he caught a little short pass and then sort of spun around and made 2 defenders collide with each other and then cut up field for like 14 yards. Harold Fannin finishing it off with a touchdown. We've talked so much about Harold Fannin and his role in this offense and how prominent he's going to be. And to see him out there scoring a touchdown on that first drive, making some plays, I think that's exciting. Like, you checked all the boxes. You had Joe Flacco looking good. You had the offense, which last year, if you remember, training camp and all that, was an absolute disaster. You had the offense functioning properly. You had them being able to put together some scoring drives. I thought the run game showed some promise today. I get it. Again, you're going up against the Rams like third stringers, so I'm not going to read into it a ton. But for a unit that I think had sort of been progressingly just getting a little bit better and a little bit better, it was nice to see them find some lanes to run through. And then you capped it off with the touchdown throw, and the fact that the young guys were getting involved on that drive, I think you leave feeling like there's a lot to like there. Again, context matters. Going against the third team, I get all those things, but it was a successful and productive, I would say, outing for that unit just to get some reps in and shake off the rust a little bit. We talked about, like, you look at a team like the Bengals and how they always get off to these slow starts. 0-4 to start a season, all these different things. And last year, the Browns offense was so bad. They didn't get enough reps, I thought, during training camp in the preseason, and they were just a disaster that you got to week 1, and that disaster continued. And then it spiraled in 6, 7, whatever weeks down the line until Jameis Winston finally breathed some life into it. And then it was still bad because he was throwing too many balls to the other team. But this felt like a nice, successful day for the first team offense to just like get out there, get some reps, get a couple series together, and feel like you put something good on tape and you did something in a more meaningful setting on the field rather than just a practice against your own defense before you get out there for the ball to be kicked off week 1 and then you're off and running. So I liked the fact that they were able to do that they showed you what you were kind of looking for. And I think that fans should leave at least intrigued by, listen, Flacco being able to give this offense the life that the spark that he did in 2023 that led them to making the playoffs. I think you feel good about a lot of the young guys that are obviously doing some nice things as well, and that they continue to contribute to this team in a meaningful way this time of year before the season even starts. There's a lot of good that came from that, I think, from that first team offense, and Flacco was solid. It's what you want to see from your first string quarterback, your starting quarterback. And I think the stage is now set for them to get to hit the ground running more so when the season begins. I see some people in the comments talking about like how they're going to start the year. I like Jace Thomas, I see, has a comment where he said they're going to start 1-0. And I tend to agree because of what I mentioned. The Bengals always get off to slow starts. The Browns generally have played well against the Bengals over the years. And I think they're going to come out and play a pretty good game against that team. The Bengals defense, by the way, doesn't scare anybody. So, I'm predicting 1-0, and I'm putting that in stone right here today with the day of the final preseason game for the Browns, that I think they win the first game of the season and get off to a 1-0 start. We'll see what happens from there, but I'm predicting 1-0. Defensively, I thought you continued to see how that defensive line just comes in waves, man. Like, and again, context again, I get it. Third string offensive lineman, all those things apply. Yes. But Isaiah McGuire still continued to look really good. Alex Wright continued to look really good. You had Mason Graham, Emily Collins doing some damage. There was a number of guys that sat, and I was okay with them putting them in bubble wrap. Myles Garrett, Joe Bitonio, Denzel Ward, Greg Newsome didn't play. Cedric Tillman didn't play today as well on the offensive side. But I like that we continue to see that defensive line dominate. I think there still are some questions to answer on the back end of this defense at the cornerback spot, because like a guy like Tony Brown, I love Tony Brown, and he is here for special teams purposes, but that cannot be a guy that you're, trusting in coverage very often. And so I think there's still some things they're going to have to sort out there. The defensive, the depth there is an issue. Carson Swessinger, I think he started the game pretty much with the Browns brought too many for the Rams to block. And he gets a sack like on or I guess it was an incompletion, but in the very first play, like he just comes to the middle unblocked and like just destroys Dresser Wynn, the quarterback for the Rams. And it was a great way to start the game. So a lot to feel good about, I think, on that defensive side, especially up front, with some questions on the back end that I think they're going to have to sort out here in the coming days as they cut the roster down and maybe look at who else gets cut to sort of fill some gaps and some holes. And then the fun feel-good story that I wanted to get to was just the fact that we know one guy who's making the 53-man roster. We can obviously guess some of these other ones, but defensive tackle Aiden Huntington, who has been a special teams ace throughout the preseason, flying down, making plays. He had a couple more times today where he stuck his head in on some plays and made some things happen. Kevin Stefanski told us that Andrew Berry gave him permission to tell the media that he was making this team. So a kind of a cool story there. He was hard to miss on those special teams units. He runs like a linebacker, and he plays defensive tackle. I mean, it was incredible to watch him this entire time. He's just a hustler. And so you will see him on the 53-man roster come Tuesday. The other 52 spots are up for grabs. I will also say one other thing that is probably an area of concern that we need to discuss come Monday's episode. I don't know what's going to happen at kicker. I think Dustin Hopkins, is going to make the roster because they still believe in him and they want to have some faith in him and they think he's better than Andre Smith, but not good that he missed a PAT. And I think some of those yips from last year may be rolling over into this year, and that is not a good way to start the season if you're the Browns, with a kicker who might just not have it between the ears right now, or might still be having some issues kicking the ball. He was so brilliant 2 years ago. I don't know what happened last year, but I think kicker remains something that is going to make a Browns fan very nervous going into the season in terms of how that's going to be addressed and handled. And I think, again, Hopkins makes the team, but week one rolls around. That's going to be one of those positions that I think fans just are naturally nervous about before the season starts and going into the season. And it's probably going to be a season-long thing that we're talking about if the inconsistencies continue there. So we'll see how the Browns handle it. We'll see what happens. But I think Dustin Hopkins is on the team. More to talk about, of course, on Monday. I'll give you my next iteration of a 53-man roster projection. So I'll work on that tomorrow and then debut that for you Monday. We might get some cuts on Sunday, too, to talk about to sort of set the stage for that conversation. But I do want to thank you for being on every day here at the Locked On Browns podcast, talking about your favorite football team. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make Locked On Browns your first listen every day. For your second listen, you can check out Locked On Fantasy Football with Vinny Liar and Michelle Madjuk. Listen every day to prep for your fantasy draft and become the most informed manager in your league. Or you can keep it local. Check out Locked On Cavs or Locked On Guardians. Thank you for being on every day here at the Locked On Podcast Network. I'll talk to you again real soon, Cleveland. See ya.